What do you think would happen if you made the decision to sketch every day for 100 days? What if you let go of perfection and showed up to your imperfect practice? What if you let go of the expectations of being good on the first, second, or third try? What if you stopped making excuses and built the skills that would take your art to the next level? What if you got to a mastery level in your drawing, blending, or composition skills? What if you were 95% better than everyone else at your particular process? And what if I told you that you actually didn't need to spend hours in the studio every day to accomplish this? What if I told you that all it took was 18 minutes a day? That's what we're talking about today in this video. It's all about the rule of 100 hours. So what exactly is the 100-hour rule, and why is it important to your art practice? So before we get started, I don't know if any of you have ever watched, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell. I'm not entirely sure because in my brain, I'm not always good with names, but I will make sure that I look it up. But there is this video going around, and it was around 15 years ago when I started my own art practice. And it talks about the importance of putting 10,000 hours into your practice in order to become a master. And so when I first heard that early in my art making days, I thought, okay, I am going to commit to creating art, and I'm going to put in the time, and I'm going to do it on a daily basis. And one of the first things that I did in my own creative practice was I ended up challenging myself to create one art journal page a day for a whole entire year. Now, this was back in the day, you guys. This was in the day of blogging. There was no social media. Our form of social media and putting our art out into the world was through blogging. I think YouTube might have been around, but that was pretty much it. You would blog about your art, and then you would network with other bloggers back in the day. And so I made a commitment to creating an art journal page every day for a whole entire year. And I know that my art grew by leaps and bounds that year. So why am I mentioning this? And let's go ahead and go back to the 100-hour rule and how it applies to your own specific art practice. And I'm going to go a little bit more in depth about why I believe that it's important to not only put in the time, but to have a focused art practice. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that in just a minute. So this rule states that if you spend 100 hours or about 18 minutes a day in any given discipline, you'll get better than 95% of the world's population in that discipline. For example, if you study methods, and I'm not sure what that's referring to, but methods for an hour a day, you could be better than 95% of students in a little over 3 months. So depending on how much time you have within your day, you can, in a really short amount of time, get better. And the rule emphasizes consistency and focusing on micro skills and on where you can excel. Now, why do I think that this is so incredibly important for artists? And why do artists completely miss this? And one of the things that I've noticed, not only from my own creative journey, but also from talking to a lot of artists. And there is this mindset that we get as artists where we really struggle to commit to one thing for a period of time. So, for example, when I first started my own creative practice, I did not want to do one type of art making. And I think partly because inspiration was a little bit sparse for me, I often didn't necessarily know what to paint or where to go. And so it was almost like I was just sitting around waiting for inspiration to strike. One of the things that I just want to emphasize is that when you set a goal in your creative practice and you decide, okay, I am going to get better at line work, and you set a goal of getting better at line work, and you commit to setting aside even 10 minutes a day to drawing or sketching, I can guarantee you that in a short amount of time, you will excel at line work. And I have watched this happen over and over again in my students who normally are just completely scattered when it comes to their art practice. Like maybe one day they'll do this, one day they'll do that, the next day they'll do something else. But when they commit, okay, I am going to make 100 portraits, right? And they decide to sit down, even for 10 minutes a day, even if they don't finish a portrait every single day, but they commit to it. They go deeper in one thing. And this is the key. And I know it's so hard because we get distracted and we want to be, always, doing something new, right? We're all about the shiny, flashy objects, right? We get shiny object syndrome as artists. But when they sit down and they say, okay, just for 10 minutes, I'm going to work online, or just for 10 minutes, I'm going to work on a portrait, or just for 10 minutes, I'm going to develop my blending skills, or just for 10 minutes, I'm going to, make a new color palette every day. Whatever it is that you're really focused on in your work. And I do recommend that you focus on one of the 7 elements of art, either line, shape, color, form, value, texture, or space. And I do think it's good to go deeper in the ones that you're really more interested in. And if you haven't taken my art style blueprint quiz, the link is in the description. I highly recommend this. It will tell you what your top elements of art are in relation to your process and your style. And so once you figure out, okay, one of my top elements of art is, let's say, form and maybe shape and color, right? And let's say you're already good at color and shape, but you want to hone your skills of form. If you would commit to your practice working on form every day for 100 days and 10 hours a day or whatever it is, you are going to excel at form at the end of that time period. Now, I realize I wasn't really mathing all that great in that last, but you get the idea. And it's not even that you have to complete the 100-hour rule, but at least start working towards it, because you will see a difference, and you will see a difference rather quickly. So going deeper into one thing is not it's not like you're saying, I'm never going to do anything new ever again. It's just saying, I am committing to getting better at this one thing. And listen to me, if you have been struggling in your skill set, if you've been struggling as an artist and you don't like the art that you're making on a regular basis, this is the one thing that is going to take your art to the next level. So it's not just about the time that you're putting in, it's about the focused time that you're putting in and having a goal within the time you're spending in your art practice. That's the key. Not just, I'm going to make art for 10 minutes every day. It's, I'm going to focus on this skill where I am lacking the most. Okay, so controversial opinion, I know. Okay, here's something that I 100% believe to be true. Anyone can build the skills that they want to have as an artist. Now, I'm not saying that we're all starting on completely the same level. Some people are going to have to work harder than others, but I can guarantee you, skills can be acquired. It's not about talent. It's about commitment. It's about consistency, and it's about practice. So this is what I think as an artist. I think success is more like 80% practice and 20% talent. You can get better as an artist if you apply yourself in your art practice. It requires a commitment from you, but the focus goes such a long way, just like I mentioned a little bit ago. And guess what? You don't have to be spending hours upon hours upon hours in the studio. We are talking 10 minutes a day on building a skill. That's all it takes, really. The sad truth, though, is this. Most artists won't take the time to get better or develop themselves as an artist. Most artists are not going to follow this plan. And a lot of artists actually give up before they ever even start. And some of this has to do with our mindset piece, right? We go into it already feeling like a failure. Now, my friend Jean Oliver, she always shares this amazing analogy about how, if you were to sit down and let's say you don't play the guitar, right? And someone hands you a guitar and they tell you to play your favorite song on the guitar, would you expect yourself to be able to play that piece of music perfectly if you've never picked up a guitar ever before? Absolutely not. So why is it that we as artists make such harsh decisions and judgments about our own skills without putting in the practice? And this happens so much. I watch it with artists who, let's say they decide to build a skill and they sit down and they go to create something, and it doesn't happen within the first, maybe 5 or 6 tries. And so they make a judgment about their skills. They say, I'm just not good at blank. Have any of you ever done this? Have you ever said this to yourself? I'm just not good at drawing. I am not good at creating something with form or making something realistic or whatever it is. If you have ever said any of those statements to yourself, you're making judgments without putting in the practice. And compare it to playing a guitar. How many hours are you going to have to put into practicing a song? I mean, there's so many pieces. You have to learn the chords. You have to learn how to strum. You have to learn how to hold the guitar. You have to, not only really know all of the basic pieces, you have to actually go through the motion of playing the song over and over and over and over again. And therefore, why do we resist with every fiber of our being doing something over and over and over again in our art practice? And I think some of it has to do with messages that we got early on in our childhood, early on in our creative practice, where we made these assumptions that it's not worth my time if I'm not good at it to begin with. Because we hear those messages, like, I don't know about you, in like early art class or even at elementary school, where the students who had talent in art, they were the ones who were rewarded, the ones who were good to start with. And somewhere along the way, we got this message that we're either good at it or we're just screwed, right? It's not worth pursuing if we're not good to begin with, right? Another reason why I think we struggle with this so much is because so much of our identity is tied into our art, because we spend all of this time putting ourselves into our art practice, that when it doesn't come out the way that we want it to, or it doesn't have the response that we want it to, then we take it personally and it feels just harder, right? It's sometimes hard for us to separate ourselves from the art that we're making. And I can tell you, for me, one of the biggest ways to kind of disconnect in a way, I mean, we don't ever want to necessarily disconnect from our artwork, but maybe get to the place in our art practice where we don't take it so personally. If I make a piece of art that I don't really like that much, or that just is bad art, we can kind of just brush it off and understand that it's part of the process. We are going to make bad art. But anyways, like I was saying, one of the most powerful things is just to make more art. And committing to your creative practice is a huge, huge piece of that. And so when you make a piece of art that you don't like, I encourage you to really just sit with it and look at it. And instead of making a split judgment or an immediate judgment about whether it's good or bad or ugly or, whatever, I want you to really reflect on the reasons that you like it and the reasons that you don't like it. Start to ask yourself some questions about what is it that you don't like, and being able to identify that in the process of this messy, imperfect practice is going to be so, so key for you. So I want to encourage you. If you are struggling in your art practice and you don't like the art that you are making, I want you to make this one change by focusing on one subject matter, 100 pieces, and growing one skill for a period of time. And you might not make it to 100 pieces, and that's okay. I don't want you to stress out, okay? If it stresses you out, then just don't do it, or do a smaller chunk. Do 30 pieces. And I want you to, you can be distracted, you can do other kinds of art, but just be consistent in that one area for a period of time. And just watch and see how your skills grow and how quickly you get better as an artist for that period of time. So just to recap, in order to actually get better as an artist, we have to focus on building these micro skills, right? So let's just say that you took my art style blueprint quiz and your top element is value. I would recommend doing a study on value. What could you do? So what could you do if you wanted to do a study on value in a very informal way? What I would recommend is you could do color studies on value. So you could choose one shade and you could just let's say blue, and you could create a monochromatic blue painting where you're focused on the darkest blues to the lightest blues, and really work on creating some sort of dimension with one color. You could do a pencil study on value. You could do a whole bunch of value studies in oils on canvas or on oil painting paper. You could take 100 different photographs of still life and turn them into black and white, and then focus on, painting those photographs or even sketching those photographs. And I do think that sometimes working in less color when you're wanting to build the skills of developing value is beneficial, because color can become a distraction, which is why I said doing monochromatic paintings would help you build that as well. So, and it doesn't have to be complicated, you guys. It can be simple. it can be really easy, and what it might not even be that the art that you're making in your 100 pieces is like the finished painting, and that's okay. It's about building a skill, right? And so doing 100 line drawings or 100 contour drawings is going to be so incredibly powerful for building the skill of sketching and finding the lines in different photographs or inspirational photos or even still life. But it might not be like the whole picture of your painting. Line is just one piece of that, right? And so it's not that you're making 100 finished pieces. You are making 100 pieces that build the specific skill that you are lacking as an artist. So let me just run through a few different resources for all of you. I have a free online course. It's in the caption. It's 100 days of imperfect practice. And a lot of it is what I am telling you right here. And what's really cool is that even as I have been reflecting on my own creative journey, I just want to say that I made that course maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, and I continue to keep an imperfect practice. So here's an example of some of the pieces that I have been working on. This is me. I'm doing a little bit deeper of a study in value. I love shape and I love lines and color, obviously, but this is me going deeper into value here. So messy. See how much depth I'm getting in the background of this piece, and really going for the messy brush strokes. So there's this one. I'm just showing you some examples just to show you that this is what I do when I want to grow as an artist. So again, I'm going more into value and softness. It's still fairly contrasting, and I still use a lot of shape in my work. But this one is fun because this piece is one that I painted over, and this might even be in the 100 days of imperfect practice. And this just reminds me of what I was telling you a minute ago, or what I was about to say a minute ago, and that is I'm a better artist today than I was when I made that course. And even when I look at the pieces that I did in that course, I am making better art than when I made that course. And that's my whole point, is that we should always be getting better. We should always be growing. And it's because when I sit down to do these pieces, I don't need them to be anything. I don't need them to be a masterpiece, although if I love them, and I'm so excited. But this is about exploring and building skills. And this is another one that I revamped and added more depth and blending of values into the background. This was originally just a line drawing. And here's another one that is really fun. I'm developing, again, a lot more depth in the background. It's still not like maybe as far as some other people who are really good at value. But I just want to say that one last thing about that is that our changes are incremental. And so if you have a comfort zone in your creative practice of something that you do all the time and you do it really well, and you're wanting to step out of that, it takes tiny little baby steps. and consistent practice in that one particular area. And so as I'm even looking at some of these pieces, I can see how I can even add more depth into them, right? Because my eye is constantly changing and what I can see. And that is the most important thing, because when you can see it, you can actually improve as an artist. So don't be discouraged if the growth is slow. It's about incremental changes and getting better every single day. So that resource is in the caption. Also, my art style blueprint quiz. And also, I just opened up a membership. I haven't told a lot of people about it, but if you want support in building your art business and in some of these style questions that you have, even accountability, I would love to have you inside of the Flourish and Flow Society. And I will leave the link in the caption there as well. And I am looking forward to hearing back from you. I want to know how quickly you can build your skills in one of these areas, because it's so incredibly important. And I want to hear feedback on, in a month or two, the progress that you have made by committing to your practice in this way. Thanks so much for watching. And up next, I did say that I'm going to create a video where I go deeper into developing your own process. So I'm working on that video right now.